If moving to Jamaica is something that you've considered, definitely stay tuned for today's interview because today on the line I have an amazing woman who made the move to Jamaica in the middle of a pandemic. And I can't wait to share her story with you. Rokhaya, tell me about Jamaica. What are some of the pros of living on this amazing Caribbean island?
Well, wow, there's so many things. I think mainly the healing. I think a lot of people come here to heal from a place of toxic. That was for me the main thing, to escape the burnout, the everyday go, 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 especially from the corporate Canada that I moved from. I was freelancing coming a year before coming here. The food, of course, definitely. Not only when I say food, the curry chicken or the brown stew, but definitely the fact that you can pick your food, you can grow your food. The mantra here is grow what you eat what you grow. And definitely that's something that I stand for and that I was very impressed with when I first visited before even thinking of moving here. Even my body in itself going back and forth, I noticed the change. I wasn't really able to eat the same things while in Canada. I couldn't digest things the same way. So noticing those subtle changes really showed me that that was real food. So I would say it's really in the roots as well, going back to live somewhere where people look just like you. I know that one comes back often, but it does make a real impact because for me, I realized being in Canada as a what I would call African Canadian, but really I truly just relate to being African because I'm born in Senegal. Yes, I did leave when I was about 7. Like my parents immigrated to Canada. I followed a few years later. And for me, it's exactly that. It was to be able to go back to a place I have roots and also a place where a part of my history is that I was never taught, in Canada. And even if they taught us the Black history, like, is it really that way that it happened? I really wanted to go and find out. So for me, it was really a call to find myself and find my connections with my ancestors. So that's what triggered really the first visit after I had an injury at work, kind of reflect back. I needed, a change of scenery. And rebellious like I am, I decided, of course, to go to the country that I've always heard, kind of always a mismatch of good and then really bad picture of it as well. Luckily, I never really believe other people's story till I hear it from the source. But I was like, yes, Jamaica, because every time they're like, oh no, you shouldn't go alone. Oh no, it's dangerous. Oh, make sure, they don't catch you with this and that. And every time it would be in the back of my head, like maybe I should find someone to go with. But that year I decided, no, I will go even if I have no connection there. I'll make the connection. If not, what can I lose? Just coming back to the same place. So the pros were really in the healing, the roots, and being somewhere familiar in some way.
Yeah,
The cons, yes.
Yeah, let's save the cons for later because I'm loving the aspect that so your family is originally from Senegal, you grew up in Canada, and yet you are in Jamaica. So was Jamaica somewhere that was always on your radar? Because it's also really exciting because from my perspective with the Exit Collective, I'm really looking to engage folks from the entire diaspora. It's not just folks who've got familial links to the Caribbean. So for you, as someone whose more direct roots are in Africa, did you always plan to move to the Caribbean? Like, how did that come about? I'm super curious.
That's a great question. To tell you the truth, it was never a plan, but I have been influenced by like many of us, by the Jamaican culture. The Jamaican culture in itself speaks so loud, it reached so far. So if I go really back in memories, I would say the influence of Jamaica on me was in the times of, teenager, early adulthood, where I'm going out, mingling. And one thing I forgot to mention too is that I've always had that offbeat life. So when we immigrated to Canada, we lived in the east of Canada. And I can tell you, like, every 3 years I've moved, I've changed schools. So I've lived different places in Canada until I made my way more into the central area, to be more specific, Winnipeg, Canada. And there is a very rooted community of Jamaicans, probably like the first Jamaicans to have, start migrated to Canada, kind of group there. And many of them that I've met been there like 40 years. They've done the back and forth, but they're settled at the same time. So that's where the community I started, I guess, meeting. Never got really involved, but the music, the dancehall, especially the reggae, is just connected. It was already part of me. I know I get the comments one time, being in Jamaica, they're like, "Oh, you can dance, like dance on." I was like, "Of course!" Like, if as an African who moves to Canada, and as a minority, that's what they make you believe. When we're really a global majority, you're able to know, oh, that's my roots. Like, I can connect with that. Like, I'm not gonna connect with country first, or house music or things like that. So I would say the influence started there. And we're all very familiar, of course, with Marcus Garvey, but Marley, and many of the influencers here. But never did I imagine that I would be married to a Jamaican and I would have a family and I would be living here. Never in my life. And if you ask my husband today, I always look at him and I'm like, I'm in Jamaica? And like, really? Because for me, at least, I was like looking at the culture, the dance. I was like, imagine being actually in Jamaica and like dancing this. It must be awesome. But that's not the experience, of course, I had once I moved here. It's when Jamaica was going through a state of emergency. So there was a lot of like, ways of not having too much parties or trying to get entertainment to not really go on in the street so much because of the violence. Of course, if you're in the resort, you get entertained and so on. So for me, when I moved here, I wasn't living the touristic life. I was really living the modest, humble, simple life, being the fact that my husband comes from a background like this. So respect to his modest life, I conducted myself that way. Also because when I moved here, it wasn't like a plan that was all set up. It was really, I moved here to see different opportunities, and then I ended up being stuck here because of the pandemic.
Right. And you're one of those amazing people who I keep on coming across who moved like literally at the start of the pandemic. Like the number of people who are like, yeah, I moved in February or March 2020. It's really great. It's interesting, that synchronicity. So tell us more. How did that happen? What was the plan? Tell us about your journey to actually being in Jamaica from February 2020 or March, sorry.
Yes. So with the influence and hearing all those different stories about Jamaica, as I said, always been in the back of my mind. When it really became a concrete ticket and yes, I'm going, was when I get injured at work. So I was in corporate America working as a train conductor. And for me, it was the first injury ever. And it was also a position that I had been in Winnipeg, where I had that dancehall influence. And then I was able to even relocate in Toronto, Canada, where I continued. So for me, I was coming from 3 years of just working, never had taken any vacation or anything. So when I got injured, I was like, oh, I need a change of scenery. And rebellious like I am, I decided, let's go to Jamaica. Let's go back to my roots. This will be a healing journey, as I mentioned. So I booked my ticket, and through connection at work, luckily, many of my coworkers were already into that journey of kind of nomads in some way, where they've always been to Jamaica very young. And due to the nature of our work, as I said, you could work a certain number of hours and not pick up your phone and just go about your business. So many of them would kind of do that kind of work hard and then go to Jamaica. So they made the connection with me. They get me a driver. I was booked months ahead. So I was aiming to go for my birthday, went there in 2017, and just, it was amazing. You know, it was more than I expected. And from then it was just always like, I'm gonna go every time I'm able to do those hours. So I did that as much as I could. And then I also started kind of a long distance relationship at the time, where that driver that was my connection through my coworkers became a relationship.
Oh, wow.
So yes. Yes, I
Interesting.
found everything at the same time.
Yeah. So I've got to ask, just because I know people watching are going to be curious. So stereotypically, you know, there's that movie that how Stella got her groove back on whatever. Like Jamaican men have a reputation, and then I'm sure with all the warnings that you got, violence, la la la, that must have been one of the warnings too. So tell me about how you worked with that, how you overcame that. Like, was it something that you were like, should I, shouldn't I?
That's awesome. You ask great questions.
I'm nosy.
The first time I went back, I kind of just left it to fate, just because I felt like it was a call of God for me to go there. And as I left, I felt so light. I said, whatever happens, happens. I'm not going to force it. And the lifestyle I had already also was such a irregular lifestyle, where I wasn't really meeting anybody where you are, because I was never in Toronto. I'm always traveling to this destination, A, B. And then when I come back, home is just to rest, do laundry, cook, and go back again. So the long distance is something I've always attracted, no matter, I guess, because I moved so much with the family. So it was just perfect. It was kind of a confident. When I tell close people that were my real friends, they took it the same way. Like they would light up and they would say, oh, just follow it and see where it takes you. So those are your real friends. And people, of course, that are talking from their insecurities are saying, oh, like, oh, you know, Jamaican man, if I was you, I remember a friend telling me, make sure you have a boyfriend here still, you know, like as an option. But I was at that time of my life, like I was 30 then, you know, where I've done, you know, the dating. As I said, I was in the big city now, Toronto, and I felt I moved to Toronto late. I was like, I can't keep up with the clubbing life. So I was really just focused on saving and probably buy something in Canada. So that was my focus. And coming here was just a release and a healing for me. And for the first time, he was moving towards something. So I felt like every time we talked about a goal, he would achieve it. And then we were moving, you know, together. Now we're living together. And then now the parents knew. And then my parents at the time lived actually in Texas. So I went there, we got married, and like just something really simple, because I had the intention maybe to go there for a year. And just coming from an African culture, very strict culture, being like a Muslim woman as well. So we needed to make that union officialized before I could make that move. So that was done late of 2019. So all of that, it was back and forth, just working, hustling. And then there was the loss of my job in May of 2019, which pushed me. Now I am flexible in my schedule. I'm not attached to anything per se. And in the back of my mind, I've always had the entrepreneurial mindset. I've been part of like different companies, multi-level marketing and so forth. So I thought, let me try to freelance, you know, let me try to to struggle and see where it takes me. Because for me, I was struggling already, having a really high position, but paying all those high bills. Like living in Toronto is crazy. And it made no sense to me, because I was paying for a tiny, tiny little apartment and I'm never there. So why and I couldn't see myself neither raise a family there. Like I would have to move. And then once you move somewhere comfortable for a family setting in Toronto, then there's commute, there's traffic. Like I was just at a point of my life, as I said, I was done. And that injury it showed me a face of the corporate world that there's no loyalty. So I'm giving my sweat, my life, my time. I lost many friendship due to that position because as I said, it's not your Monday to Friday 9 to 5. It's just 24/7. I'm on call. And on your breaks, I would pick up more work to be able to get that time off. So coming from a 3-year where I kind of was working to try to make my way, got injured, then just went on this offbeat life, thinking I'm healing myself, going back and forth, but just was getting more and more tired. And I think God just called it a quit, and he said, let me just make sure she loses her job. And then she wakes up. So at first I seen it as like, oh my God, like this is the end of my world. But something in the back of my mind also said, try it. There's, you don't have kids yet, you have no excuse really, like go try it. And worst case, which I always find is my comfort, is that I'm an African. Like if it doesn't work out in Canada, I can go to Africa. And now I have Jamaica added. And this is really my vision too, to be able, just as you say, to connect people of the African diaspora like everywhere, to build that community. And this is why I connect so much with podcasting and speakers. And this is why I work with women of color creatives in that industry.
Right. Yeah. No, and I love the way that you're kind of weaving all of these things together. But let's kind of go back to March 2020. Mm-hmm. What was that like? Did you plan to be in Jamaica? How did you see yourself working through that initial time that you were supposed to be there?
So once we married in late 2019, I was already in preparation. Like, okay, so should I keep my apartment? Should I not keep it? I decided to go back to Canada early January 2020. And that's when I started cleaning up, downsizing. I discovered I was attached to a lot of material things.
What were you attached to?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I never thought of the barrel option, like Canada to Jamaica. It would cost me so much. I know it's a concept for Americans to do. Sometimes the UK, I guess, because the connection is there. It's a British colony. But for me, Canada, I wasn't thinking that. So I let go of everything that I had. Like the apartment was tiny. So it's not like I built so much. I had furniture I was attached to, shoes, because I had to choose what I'm going to bring in my luggage. They literally discriminate you. If you are not all booked in the resort, you pay for your every luggage to go to Jamaica. It's only if you're like booked in a nice resort, you have to check luggage, or if you're in business class, perhaps. But the way I was going just as a trooper, I had to really know what I wanted to bring. And of course, for me, was my daily survival, like my iron, my juice machine, like, anything like kitchen to cut, cutleries and things like that I wouldn't want to buy again, that I had to sacrifice. So for that, I sacrificed clothes. And I'm a very much of a fall person. I love my scarves and, my woodies. So all that, I was like, I'm not going to leave it in a luggage in Jamaica. So I let go of all of that. And because it's winter time in Canada, I gave most of it away because people are not really willing to come pick it up in the snow. So it was nice though. I did some connection, downloaded some apps that you could trade things. So some things I might need it, I traded for some IKEA, furniture. Those were the popular ones. And then I did kind of a goodbye party where I wanted to tell my story, but it was a fail. There was so much emotion because the way I lost my job was in an ordinary way. And it's not a story that I've shared yet, but this is why I'm doing this now. I want to be more visible, connect with more people to get the courage to share that part of the story. And still, the people felt it was a goodbye, but I held on to the apartment. But I had kind of emptied most of it. And then my plane ticket was booked, and the COVID panic has started also already. Like when I was going back in January, the tension, you could feel it in the airport in Toronto. So I knew there was a sense of urgency that like everybody was looking at me like, is she really leaving? Because I was kind of leaving fast. But at the same time, they know it wasn't something I planned. So March 2nd, I just took the flight and come to Jamaica. And my husband, actually, the family-in-law, were getting married on March 9th. So that was another reason for me to make it earlier. But literally, I arrived, we went to the wedding. And then Friday past was 2 years that the pandemic went global. So literally 9 days after my arrival, now I was faced with living now with my husband 24/7
Wow.
and learning that too.
Wow, and pure, well, in some ways, a baptism of fire, but what, an initiation in some ways. You were like thrown into it and like, and what I love as well, we were talking before, is that quite often people think, I need to plan this, I need to research the history, I need to know the economics, I need to know X, Y, and Z, like have a six-figure savings. And for some people, you might need that. Some people who are risk averse, you like to have as much certainty as possible. That might be your stance, but you didn't have that. I mean, yes, you had a partner, a husband who was from there, but taking that brave step of, okay, I'm here, I can't go back. What do I do? You've obviously answered it in ways because you're still there. 2 years later, you're still there. You're still smiling. You're still glowing.
Yes.
So I love that your story is a testimony to the fact that if you want to do it, you find ways to make it work. So tell me
Yes.
what making it work look like for you and your family.
Yes, making it work, making it work. I think it's a everyday process. I think is embracing the fact that I was privileged to be able to relocate and, as you said, have the husband support. And yes, that I never really had to answer all those questions, that God was there to answer those, and that I might not know the plan now, but I can take every step every day. So making it work for me was one, to really to be. I found it was really hard for me to just be.
Mm.
I guess that year it was hard for most of us because now we're like home, for especially for people like me that always were traveling, I was coming from 3 years of just moving back and forth, traveling at work, traveling for the relationship. And now all of a sudden I'm home and I'm not much of a homebody at all. So I wanted to pull my hair out when I first was stuck at home. And I was telling my husband, I have no routine, I can't go to yoga, I can't do anything. So I had to really learn to be. So be present, being mindful was what helped me realize, okay, this is where I am. Because no matter where you are, I think you said it best. No matter where you are, here you are, because I was all in my head. So if you're in your head, then it seems like you're still in the West, like somewhere in Canada, and dealing with the same struggle. I was having the same stress about the daily bills, the same agony about should I let it go of this or should I hold on to it? I wasn't here. So I was not even really, I felt I was living in Jamaica in the first year.
Meaning.
I was mostly in my head, and also I think what didn't help is that I wasn't able to go out like Jamaicans do and mingle because we're stuck at home and you're seeing all the number of total deaths and how many infection. But as things unfold and you're watching the news, you're connecting with the rest of the world, I started to notice that, wow, I was such an ungrateful person. I was so self-centered. And it brings you back to the brainwash of the corporate world, go, 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 give me everything you have, don't rest. I've learned here now that resting is actually an act of resistance. You know, I use resting now to the best of my capabilities. Like I tell my husband now, oh, when my day is not planned and I have nothing to do, I love it. I have nothing to do today. Rokhaya, like 2 years ago, would be like, what? I have nothing to do? I'm gonna go crazy. So to be mindful, to connect. So because I couldn't connect with people, that's when I was like, okay, let me invest in myself and connect with online communities. Now they were not necessarily Jamaican communities. So then I was a little bit more comfortable because they're in their head, I'm in my head. We're talking about mindset, you know, they relate. Jamaican people are so, they're healers, like for me. So I was learning from them. You know, I was trying to learn the patois through comedy with TikTok videos, trying to learn the culture. Of course, a husband always there teaching me. The music tells you about the politics. It tells you about, you know, really what's affecting the Black community and how we can get better. So even eating, as I said, learning to be better, learning to be grateful, that's what put me more at ease. And then I embark, of course, in the paperwork world. And that's another stress. And that taught me, wow, I'm not patient. I have no patience at all. And again, it brings me back to my go, go, go lifestyle, traveling and having passengers who want their meals now, and they want everything now. And sometimes we were delayed for 4 hours. I'm stuck with angry passengers. So all that mental, you know, like I handled it good, but they always say it's your body that takes the emotion. So I think that rest was needed too. Like we did a lot of resting. And as I learned to rest and not stress, late 2020, I discovered I'm pregnant. So we've invested already in some course. I've had launched my business in June of 2020, where I was doing mostly video editing and helping people launch some podcasts, but, you know, just really investing mainly in myself and learning new things. So now it takes a turn. I'm going to be a mother. It's exciting. And I still keep on the mindfulness day to day, being grateful. And this is when you see your calling, you see all the answers come out. You know, you're like, yes, you know, now I have an excuse to not procrastinate. There's a baby coming, you know, trying to be
I feel like a
active.
9-month deadline to get you focused. So like, it's now or never.
Yes, but surprisingly, it was slow, but the slow and the rest bloomed. Every day I find it blooms. You know, the mission at first, as I said, was just healing and learning about myself, dealing, as I said, as I learned, like even today, I'm learning more and more that I suffered from. You know, as I said, I wasn't very mindful, I wasn't very grateful, I wasn't very present, and I wasn't really conscious of like the decisions I was making in my life caused all of this, and that it wasn't too late for me to change that. And I just took my time and kept investing and pouring in myself, getting closer to the creator, to get the answers. Because at the end of the day, he has the answers. And the pandemic was just the right spice and ingredient to mix everything together. But I found that really, to close this question, is really to be here, to really, for me, I had to stop the back and forth, because the back and forth always took me to, oh, like, what if? And this is why the whole planning is not necessary, because we're privileged enough. As I said, especially for me, I have plan ABC. Like Jamaica doesn't work out, Canada. If Canada doesn't work out, hey, pack my bags, go back to the motherland. And if that doesn't work out, well, I'm sure, you know, I will have learned so many lessons. For me, I can live anywhere. And this is what I want to teach other women of color, to be location independent and to be ready that no matter what happens, you know, Jamaica might not be the place forever. Maybe as my family grow, I won't want to stay here, but to know that I have the option, and it's never too late to reinvent yourself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think also, whether it's what the COVID period was like for people, or what the first year of moving is like for people. Transitions are tricky. It might look great on Instagram, and the beach might be nice and the food might be nice, but it's definitely, I found it's a process that's a bit like having a mirror held back to you, especially places where life is slower, where things move more at a pace that's just totally different. In some ways, you can't really hide from yourself. It gets presented back to you. Am I impatient? Am I anxious? Am I X, Y, Z? And I love the way that you rode with it. You weren't trying to, I mean, because you couldn't push it away. There was nowhere to go. You were in your house. And I think for folks to just think about what their coping strategies might be. I was going to say if, but probably when they find themselves in that scenario, it really does help you to have ways to stay grounded and not panic and not spin and not want to like regret it, but actually, okay, this is part of the journey. This is part of the transformation, because you are becoming a different person. And it's interesting sometimes when you're there and you're like, who am I? I'm not who I was. You know, it's and if you adding being a mother to the mix, that it ramps it up a lot. And so tell me what did it look like for you professionally? Because what you were doing in Canada, in terms of working on trains, that was no more. You moved thinking that you were going to stay for maybe 6 months, a year, but when it became, okay, I'm raising my family here, how did you know what to do, and what did you end up putting in place?
As you mentioned, I think I was getting tested. So it's like everything fell in place because God had prepared me before. So I felt like he made me heal first, then calm my nerve, because of course you don't want to be pregnant and have nerve, because already it brings so many different emotions. It got me focused on appreciating the online and embracing the online world, because that was not something I was open-minded to. I was introduced to the online world by my best friend in 2019 when I had lost my job, and she told me about virtual assistants. And I was kind of perplexed and said, I don't want to be anybody's assistant. I don't like to do admin work. So I'm not quite sure how I'm going to like coming from the train life to being in an office or behind a computer. But brushing off that mindset and shifting my mindset, I was able to embrace that world. And then I was so thankful, because once I was pregnant, it was just a question now of restructuring, because I was able already, I proved to myself in 2020, I can make money online. Now, I'm not making as much as what I was making in Canada. Let's say I'm making a third of what I was making in Canada. But because I positioned myself early on coming here and cutting my ties with Canada, not all my ties, but really like bills mainly, and rearrange my finance, but simply by removing some of the expenses there, I'm now in a position where I have 1/10 of my expenses.
Wow.
Because yes, my rent alone here and the rent is 10 times over there. So this kind of took my saving that would have probably lasted 6 months in Canada, made me last a year and a half. And again, for the humble beginnings that my husband come from. And as I said, when I moved here, I didn't entertain tourist lifestyle. And this is again, because of being an African, I owe that to myself. I'm here with my African people. I'm not going to go and like dangle like my drink or, you know, my super meal, all inclusive. And through learning the history of Jamaica too, I learned, especially for my husband, who's in the touristic world, that going into a resort and having that experience of all inclusive, we are supporting our slave masters, because those hotels are not owned by Jamaicans. And then they go as far as even creating their own system towards the tourist board, where they will stop those tourists in attraction that are not Jamaican owned neither. So now learning that and getting that shift of mindset, I cannot permit myself to be living that kind of life. And to tell the truth, that the first time I came, I stayed in an Airbnb. I did not do the resort. I did it, I think, when I went to Cuba, and I told myself I would never do that again because I didn't feel like I connected with Cubans. I connected with like Eastern Canadians, and I'm like, I just escaped from there.
Yeah.
So knowing that part of the history, I live among Jamaicans. I don't live like, yes, we are Negril, but this is so he's close to work. But the mission, even before the kids, because my husband already had a son and he comes from the hills. They don't like us to say the countryside because they say the whole of Jamaica is a country. So he's not a countryman, like, which they kind of use sometimes as an insult here, but he's on the hillside. So in the hillside, that's where you can grow things and, you know, live the simple life. Not that they don't do it in the city, but in the city, like tends to have that influence of the tourist and the hustling of trying to get things from the tourists. So we the whole time we were here, that was our plan. The pandemic kind of slowed us down, but we were more just strict. So I was more strict with myself, but as I said, more conscious of like I was spending too much or I was eating too much, or, you know, like always snacking here. There's no such a thing. Like, yes, they'll buy snacks here, but I found in Canada, you're always trying to eat something, especially if I'm studying or working, I tend to want to eat all the time. But here it's like you eat good food and you prepare for that nice meal at the end of the day, and you take the time if you have to go pick it or buy it, to prepare it, go to the market. Like that whole preparation helped me being really mindful and focused. And then I was able to take that with me and save that money and invest in my business to structure it so it works for me. So now I have a small team still, but I have a virtual assistant of my own that can help me, was promoting and posting for me while I was going to, because pregnancy for me, I felt very uninspired, not very creative. I couldn't eat anything, and I have a special relationship with food. So it wasn't really a good time for me, but I was so thankful that I don't have to go back to a job. I don't have to stress about that. And the pandemic, I learned that miscarriage went down so much because people were not stressed. And many of my friends from my generation, where we were having the talk of like, oh, are we ever gonna meet someone? Are we gonna get babies? We all got babies around this time. You know, like many of my childhood friends, you know, like all the few months apart. So that was exciting to start that new adventure that frankly, I never thought either. I had a lot of problem with periods, and that kind of pushed me to start eating better here, use herbs. Merengue saved my life, regularized my period. Then I was able to conceive. Like I said, it was not even planned neither. It's just going the faith as usual, taking that leap of faith. And then I moved and transitioned now to coaching. And as I'm connecting with the community, now I'm understanding their needs. And then I'm understanding also my purpose. Because when I just moved here, you learn online, yes, tell your story. But at the time, it was more like a drastic melodrama than, a, than an actual story. Like it was more like, oh, you know, I lost my job and like I can't find nothing. So let me freelance, I guess. And then I freelance, and then let me move to Jamaica. And then boom, of course, no parties, nothing to do to Jamaica. I have to now be really a wife and face all those challenges and face my inner challenge with embracing the culture. But then, as I said, God made all those steps, like all those steps were laid down. So then now that I was comfortable with the culture, then I was able to dive in more into the need of my clients, and then just pour in me, pour into my family, but knowing also, wow, like I don't have to return to a job. I don't have to pay like someone to babysit my child. I can breastfeed anywhere I feel like, you know, without like someone looking at me with a weird eye. I can be myself. I can come out with my hair crazy because it's all Black people here. Um, so it really every day made me realize, yeah, even pregnancy is not nice. I could have never been pregnant in Canada. That would have been so stressful. Even though there was a lack of, I have no friends really or family. I felt that at times. Still today, I would choose to have the baby here. So that was also the whole dilemma of 2021 is, should I go back? Should I not go back? I've shared that in my birth story, on the Birth Story in Color podcast, about how I went about the decision. But again, it was a really, every time I made a decision, God, I had another plan. And then at the end, I wanted to be mentally prepared to just be here and have this. And thank God it went well. It was a great experience. And this is why I'm like, 2022 will be about telling my story. Now it's a story. Now I can go out there. And again, God just lined up where I'm starting to meet now people who traveled abroad and start businesses there. I was like, what? They did that? There's a podcast about that? Like, even though I listened to podcasts, never thought of typing that subject line before. I was mostly like how to be a leader, how to have better speaking skills, things like that.
Yeah, and for sure. And so to tell me more, for folks anywhere, or women of color specifically, anywhere, whether they happen to be in North America, Europe, or on the African continent, who are thinking, gosh, I would love to move. I know that being here isn't for me. I want to be elsewhere, but I don't quite know how to do it. I don't know how to transfer what I'm doing now to something that can be done online. What advice would you give them, the sort of people who are like, I love what you do, but is it for me? How can I make it work? What sort of initial advice would you give them to get ready to explore making that leap?
Yes, definitely. I would, like I said, make a list of your current talents, your current passions, and then find a mentor or coach. Definitely, it will help. That's what changed it for me. Once I was introduced to a coach as a virtual assistant, then I understood the system. Before, I was just applying online and was never getting an answer. And then in 3 days of launching, I had my first client. I would start networking in the industry that you want to specialize in. It doesn't have to be what I do. I just love marketing, and I found I like to do niche marketing like that and find people's specific voice. So do that list and then get a coach that can either help you relocate, or I offer, as I said, voice coaching for people that want to network more, pitch themselves, and make a list of what are those skills? Like, what's the gap between what you want to do and what you're doing right now? What are the skills you're going to have to learn? Do you have to learn social media? Do you have to learn editing? Do you have to learn to make videos? Do you have to learn copywriting? And then this is when you decide who are you going to pay, because you'll have to outsource and delegate if you want to grow. If you have the money, if you don't have the money, then you'll have to just invest in learning it yourself. So give yourself time, keep your job if you're working, and learn those skills. This is what's going to help you, because once you have those skills and you can prove to yourself, hey, I can land jobs online. Now you've moved now to a side hustle. And then the rest is just leave it in the hand of God. Like, the doors will open where you know how you want to make money. And I find the community mostly online is usually, moms, busy people that still want to achieve a certain financial freedom, but they also want to be free to do travel and do things. For our mission is to be able to go back in the country, and we're actually doing that pretty soon by the end of this month. And we're just going to live in a little board house and start planting our food. And, it started, like I said, healing. I escaped. Then it was a pandemic. Then it was a question of, how do I make money now? And then now it's family. And now we're just building a legacy. And I think you can build a legacy, like, no matter your budget, no matter what you have. And just keep in mind, if you are able to be thinking, how can I go to another country and do this and that? Then you're privileged. Meaning, if it doesn't work out, you can still go back. You can still rent an Airbnb while you look for housing. Like, already how it works there. It's not like it's going to be hard. You've done it. I think it's just overcoming the fears and the doubts and start your mindset work early on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. I think in some ways, yes, you don't need to plan everything out. I've never put an Excel spreadsheet that has like the dates, the money. That's just not me. But I do think starting to do the preparation work beforehand and testing out your potential new career as a side hustle before you leave, that definitely can give you a true sense of, hey, is this really going to work for me? Because I think in some ways there's nothing worse than starting a brand new career overseas and figuring out it's not as lucrative as you thought, or you just don't like it. So Yeah, there's definitely ways to get things done. It's
Exactly.
been so exciting talking to you, and I can't wait to hear more about your move to the board house, because I too am looking to get even
Yes.
further out into the country. So yeah, maybe we can share some growing tips and that sort of thing.
Definitely. We'll keep connected.
Definitely. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you. But just before we go, is there any other pieces of advice that you want to give to people? Because I think you shared some real gems here today.
Yes. Just, believe in yourself. And as I said, don't think that it has all need to be laid out and planned. Sometimes you have to leave some things to the fate and just go for it. And even if it ends up not working out, there was a lesson that you could take out of it. And perhaps it was necessary to teach you that lesson. Just don't quit though. Just stick to a little bit longer. And I think that's what my situation taught me, is that because I had no option and I was miss option A, B, C, D before, I was forced to just sit a little more in my uncomfortableness until the reward just, like I was able to reap what I saw.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I love that. It's all about growth at the end of the day. Okay,
Yes.
it's been such a pleasure. I will drop your details in the description so that if folks want to get in touch with you, they can. But I
Lovely.
wish you and your family all the best on your adventure in Jamaica. And thank you so much for sharing your story.